The Romano R.82 stands as one of the most overlooked training aircraft of the 1930s, a beautifully crafted biplane that helped shape the pilots who would face the storms of World War II. While most aviation enthusiasts can rattle off details about the famous Stearman, Tiger Moth, or Harvard trainers, few know the story of this elegant French machine that combined traditional biplane charm with surprisingly modern training capabilities, designed by the visionary Etien Romano and built during one of the most turbulent periods in European history. The R.82 represented the pinnacle of French aerobatic training aircraft design. With its distinctive gull-wing appearance and robust construction, it served not only the French Air Force and Navy, but also found its way into the desperate hands of Spanish Republican pilots during their Civil War. This aircraft witnessed the transformation of aviation training from the barnstorming era into the systematic preparation for modern aerial warfare. Yet its contributions have been largely forgotten by history. Heck, with its open cockpit and traditional biplane layout, it probably made student pilots feel like they were learning to fly in their grandfather's barn, rather than preparing for the mechanized warfare that lay ahead. In the early 1930s, as Europe teetered on the edge of political upheaval, a small aircraft company nestled along the French Riviera was quietly revolutionizing pilot training. The story of the Romano R.82 begins not in the grand design bureaus of established aviation giants, but in the entrepreneurial mind of Etien Romano, a man whose passion for aviation would eventually transform the coastal city of Cannes into an unlikely hub of aeronautical innovation. Born in 1889, Romano had witnessed aviation's evolution from the Wright brothers' first flights to the mass aerial battles of the Great War, and he understood better than most that the future of aviation lay not just in faster, more powerful machines, but in the systematic training of skilled pilots who could handle increasingly complex aircraft. Romano had established his first company, the Chantiers Aéronavals de la Méditerranée, in 1921, but it was the founding of the Société des Chantiers Aéronavals Etien Romano on August 16, 1929, alongside his partner André Auniac, that would truly launch his aviation legacy. The location they chose for their factory was nothing short of inspired, positioned strategically between the sparkling Mediterranean Sea and a flat expanse of grassland that would later become the Cannes-Mandelieu Airport. This unique geography allowed them to test both land planes and seaplanes from the same facility, giving Romano's designs unparalleled versatility during development. The factory itself, a substantial rectangular building that began construction in 1930, required special foundations due to the coastal soil conditions. But by the middle of 1931, the facility was operational and Romano was ready to begin full-scale production. The political landscape of France during this period was increasingly volatile, with economic pressures from the Great Depression combining with growing tensions across Europe to create an atmosphere of uncertainty. The French government, recognizing the strategic importance of aviation, was actively seeking to modernize its air forces while simultaneously supporting the development of domestic aircraft manufacturing capabilities. This environment provided both opportunities and challenges for smaller companies like Romano, which needed to compete with established manufacturers while navigating the complex web of government contracts and military specifications. Romano understood that success would require not just innovative design, but also the ability to deliver reliable, cost-effective aircraft that could meet the demanding requirements of military training programs. The genesis of what would become the R.82 can be traced back to Romano's earlier work on aerobatic aircraft, particularly his involvement in the competitive world of air racing and demonstration flying that had captured the public imagination throughout the 1920s and early 30s. Romano had observed that while France possessed excellent combat aircraft, there was a significant gap in the availability of purpose-built training aircraft that could prepare pilots for the demanding requirements of modern aerial warfare. Most flight training was still being conducted on converted combat aircraft or aging designs that had been developed for entirely different purposes, creating inefficiencies in training programs and unnecessary risks for student pilots. Romano's solution was characteristically elegant in its simplicity. Design an aircraft from the ground up specifically for training purposes, incorporating the best features of contemporary aerobatic aircraft while maintaining the robust construction and forgiving flight characteristics necessary for student pilot operations. The initial concept, designated the Romano R.80 prototype, emerged from this philosophy in 1933, representing Romano's vision of what a modern training aircraft should be. The prototype incorporated several innovative features for its time, including a robust landing gear system designed to withstand the inevitable hard landings of student pilots, control surfaces that provided excellent feedback while remaining forgiving of ham-fisted inputs, and a structural design that prioritized both strength and repairability. Development of the prototype proceeded through 1934 and into 1935, with Romano and his team conducting extensive testing to refine the aircraft's handling characteristics and ensure its suitability for training operations. The early test flights revealed an aircraft that possessed exceptional stability and control response, qualities that made it ideal for both basic training and advanced aerobatic instruction. However, Romano recognized that the prototype, while promising, needed significant refinement before it could meet the exacting standards required for military service. Building a prototype might seem straightforward on paper, but Romano quickly discovered that convincing government procurement officials to take a chance on a relatively unknown manufacturer required more than just good intentions and a flashy demonstration. The breakthrough came when Michel de Troyes, one of France's most accomplished test pilots and aerobatic champions, flew the prototype and immediately recognized its potential. De Troyes' endorsement carried significant weight within French aviation circles, and his recommendation helped open doors that might otherwise have remained closed to Romano's innovative design. By late 1935, Romano had refined his design into what would become the R.82 configuration, incorporating lessons learned from the prototype testing and incorporating specific modifications requested by the French military evaluation teams. The transformation from prototype to production aircraft involved hundreds of detailed modifications, each designed to improve the aircraft's suitability for intensive training operations while maintaining the excellent flying qualities that had impressed de Troyes and other test pilots. As 1936 dawned, Romano found himself on the verge of his greatest success, with the French government expressing serious interest in large-scale procurement of his training aircraft. However, the political winds were shifting rapidly across Europe, and the nationalization policies of the Popular Front government would soon transform the entire landscape of French aviation manufacturing. The nationalization decree of August 11, 1936, meant that Romano's independent company would be absorbed into the newly formed Société Nationale de Construction Aéronautique du Sud-Est, or SNCAS, effective February 1, 1937. While this transition ensured the financial backing necessary for large-scale production, it also marked the end of Romano's independence and the beginning of a new chapter in the aircraft's development story. The Romano R.82 that emerged from this corporate transformation was a masterpiece of traditional aircraft design, perfectly balancing the competing demands of performance, safety, and cost-effectiveness that defined successful training aircraft. At first glance, the R.82 appeared to be a conventional biplane trainer, with its fabric-covered wings, fixed landing gear, and open cockpits, evoking the golden age of aviation that was rapidly drawing to a close. However, closer examination revealed a sophisticated design that incorporated numerous subtle improvements over earlier training aircraft, resulting in a machine that was both forgiving for novice pilots and challenging enough to prepare them for the demands of modern combat aviation. The aircraft's overall length of 7.82 meters and wingspan of 9.88 meters gave it compact dimensions that made it economical to operate while providing sufficient size for effective training operations. The heart of the R.82 was its Salmson 9 ABA radial engine, a robust 9-cylinder power plant that produced 280 horsepower and drove a 2-blade wooden propeller manufactured by Ratier. This engine choice reflected Romano's philosophy of prioritizing reliability over raw performance, as the Salmson was known for its durability and ease of maintenance rather than cutting-edge power output. The engine installation featured a carefully designed cowling that provided excellent cooling airflow while maintaining clean aerodynamic lines, and the entire power plant could be accessed through removable panels that simplified routine maintenance operations. The engine's relatively modest power output was perfectly matched to the aircraft's training mission, providing sufficient performance for all required maneuvers while maintaining predictable handling characteristics that wouldn't overwhelm inexperienced pilots. The R-82's wing design represented one of its most sophisticated features, incorporating ailerons on both upper and lower wings to provide exceptional roll control and responsiveness. The wings themselves were constructed using traditional wooden framework covered with fabric, a proven combination that offered excellent strength-to-weight ratio while remaining economical to manufacture and repair. The wing structure was designed to withstand the stresses of aerobatic maneuvers while maintaining the light control forces that made the aircraft pleasant to fly for extended periods. The interplane struts and wire bracing were carefully designed to minimize drag while providing the structural integrity necessary for training operations, and the entire wing assembly could be easily disassembled for transportation or major maintenance operations. The landing gear configuration of the R-82 reflected Romano's understanding of the realities of training operations, where student pilots would inevitably subject the aircraft to hard landings and less than perfect approaches. The fixed, divided landing gear featured robust main wheels mounted on steel tube legs with effective shock absorption, while the tailwheel provided directional control during ground operations. The landing gear was designed to be virtually indestructible under normal training conditions, and replacement components were readily available to minimize downtime. Hopefully, the engineering team included provisions for the occasional encounter with runway markers and other ground obstacles that seem to have a magnetic attraction to training aircraft worldwide. The cockpit arrangement of the R-82 was optimized for training effectiveness, with the instructor occupying the rear seat and the student positioned in the front cockpit, where visibility was maximized. Both cockpits featured complete flight controls, allowing the instructor to take control instantly if necessary, while providing the student with full authority during normal training operations. The instrument panels were laid out logically, with all essential flight instruments clearly visible, and the control stick and rudder pedal forces were carefully calibrated to provide excellent feedback without requiring excessive physical effort. The cockpits featured adequate protection from wind and weather, while maintaining the open-air environment that many instructors believed was essential for developing proper situational awareness in student pilots. The control surfaces of the R-82 were designed to provide exceptional control response across the entire flight envelope, from slow-speed approaches to aggressive aerobatic maneuvers. The ailerons featured a unique design that combined effectiveness at low speeds with reasonable control forces at higher airspeeds, while the elevator and rudder provided positive control inputs without being overly sensitive. The control surface balance was carefully calibrated to minimize control forces while maintaining sufficient feedback to help student pilots develop proper technique. Those control cables probably got quite a workout during training sessions, especially when nervous instructors found themselves white-knuckling the stick while their students explored the aircraft's handling characteristics with all the finesse of a caffeinated kangaroo. Performance-wise, the R-82 offered capabilities that were perfectly matched to its training mission, with a maximum speed of 240 kilometers per hour, or approximately 149 miles per hour, providing adequate performance for all training requirements without being overwhelming for novice pilots. The aircraft's service ceiling of 6,500 meters, or approximately 21,300 feet, was more than sufficient for training operations, while its range of 660 kilometers, or 410 miles, allowed for extended cross-country training flights. The takeoff and landing characteristics were docile and predictable, with approach speeds that were comfortable for student pilots while maintaining adequate control authority for safe operations. When compared to contemporary training aircraft, the R-82 stood out for its combination of traditional design elements with modern engineering practices. While aircraft like the American Stearman PT series offered similar capabilities, the Romano incorporated several European design philosophies that emphasized different aspects of pilot training. The aircraft's weight distribution and control characteristics were optimized for European training methods, which tended to emphasize aerobatic proficiency and precision, flying more heavily than their American counterparts. The empty weight of 918 kilograms, or approximately 2,024 pounds, and maximum takeoff weight of 1,328 kilograms, or about 2,928 pounds, placed it in the middle range of training aircraft, large enough to provide stability while remaining light enough for responsive handling. The structural design of the R-82 incorporated numerous safety features that reflected Romano's understanding of training aircraft requirements, including reinforced attachment points for the wings and control surfaces, redundant structural elements in critical load paths, and careful attention to crashworthiness in the cockpit areas. The fabric covering was treated with specialized dopes that provided both weather resistance and fire retardation, while the wooden structural elements were carefully selected and treated to ensure long-term durability under the demanding conditions of training operations. The aircraft's maintenance requirements were deliberately minimized through the use of proven materials and construction techniques, ensuring that training schools could maintain high availability rates without requiring specialized technical support. The Romano R.82 entered service with the French Air Force during 1937, as the newly formed SNS began delivering the first production aircraft to training schools across France. The timing of this introduction was particularly significant, as Europe was beginning to recognize the inevitability of another major conflict and the urgent need to expand pilot training programs. The French Air Force, or Armée de l'Air, had been struggling with an acute shortage of modern training aircraft, and the arrival of the R.82 provided a much-needed boost to their training capabilities. The aircraft was initially assigned to advanced training schools, where student pilots would transition from basic trainers to the more demanding requirements of operational aircraft, filling a critical gap in the French training pipeline. The first operational squadrons to receive the R.82 were based at training facilities in Pau, Avourde, and other established flight training centers across France. These schools quickly discovered that the aircraft's excellent handling characteristics and robust construction made it ideal for the demanding requirements of military pilot training. Student pilots found the R.82 forgiving enough to build confidence while remaining challenging enough to develop the skills necessary for operational flying. The aircraft's aerobatic capabilities were particularly valued, as the French training philosophy emphasized the importance of aerobatic proficiency in developing the spatial orientation and aircraft control skills necessary for combat operations. Instructors praised the R.82 for its predictable stall characteristics and excellent recovery qualities, which made it possible to safely demonstrate advanced maneuvers while minimizing the risk of accidents. The aircraft's robust construction proved invaluable in the training environment, where hard landings and student errors were inevitable parts of the learning process. Maintenance crews appreciated the aircraft's accessibility and the availability of spare parts, factors that contributed to high availability rates and cost-effective operations. The French Navy, or Aeronautique Navale, also recognized the value of the R.82 and ordered 30 aircraft for their own training programs, appreciating the aircraft's suitability for preparing pilots for the demanding requirements of naval aviation. However, the R.82's service with French forces was soon overshadowed by the growing political crisis in Spain, where the civil war that erupted in 1936 created an urgent demand for training aircraft among the Republican forces. In 1938, 2 R.82 aircraft were quietly transferred to Spain through intermediaries, providing the Spanish Republic with modern training capabilities that were desperately needed as they struggled to build an effective air force from scratch. These aircraft were delivered to the Republican Training School at La Ribera in Murcia, where they were used to provide advanced training and aerobatic instruction to Spanish pilots who were preparing to face the experienced pilots of the nationalist forces and their German and Italian allies. The Spanish Republicans found the R.82 to be exactly what they needed for their training programs, as the aircraft's combination of modern design and traditional handling characteristics made it possible to quickly transition pilots from basic flying skills to the advanced techniques required for combat operations. The 2 aircraft that reached Spain served with distinction, providing training for dozens of Republican pilots during the critical period when the Spanish Republic was desperately trying to build air power capable of challenging the technological superiority of their opponents. Unfortunately, the limited number of aircraft available and the chaotic conditions of the Civil War meant that detailed records of their service were not maintained, leaving many questions about their ultimate fate unanswered. Back in France, the R.82 continued to serve as the backbone of advanced pilot training programs, with production continuing through 1939 as SNS delivered the final aircraft to French military training schools. By the time France entered World War II in September 1939, approximately 147 R.82 aircraft had been delivered to the Armée de l'Air, with an additional 30 serving with the Aeronautique Navale. These aircraft represented a significant investment in pilot training capabilities, and they played a crucial role in preparing the pilots who would face the challenges of the early war period. The training programs using the R.82 had been designed to emphasize the aerobatic skills and precision flying that French military leaders believed would be essential in the coming conflict. During the phony war period from September 1939 to May 1940, the R.82 training programs continued at an accelerated pace as France struggled to build up its pilot reserves. The aircraft proved invaluable during this period, providing the foundation for training programs that graduated hundreds of pilots who would serve in operational squadrons during the Battle of France. However, the rapid German advance in May 1940 disrupted many training programs, and numerous R.82 aircraft were lost when training bases were overrun or abandoned during the chaotic retreat. Some aircraft were evacuated to southern France and North Africa, where they continued to serve with Free French forces, but the majority were either destroyed or captured during the collapse of French resistance. The experience of R.82 operations during the early war period revealed both the strengths and limitations of traditional training approaches in the face of modern warfare. While the aircraft's aerobatic capabilities and precision handling had prepared pilots well for the theoretical requirements of air combat, the reality of facing experienced German pilots in superior aircraft demonstrated that training alone could not overcome fundamental disadvantages in equipment and tactics. Those poor French pilots probably felt like they had trained for a gentleman's duel, only to find themselves in a street fight, armed with honor and tradition against opponents wielding machine guns and modern tactics. The legacy of the Romano R.82 extends far beyond its direct military service, representing a crucial link between the barnstorming era of aviation and the systematic training programs that would define military aviation throughout World War II and beyond. The aircraft's design philosophy, emphasizing reliability, forgiveness, and comprehensive training capabilities, influenced the development of training aircraft for decades to come. Many of the design principles pioneered in the R.82, including its emphasis on robust construction, excellent control response, and comprehensive aerobatic capabilities, would be reflected in post-war training aircraft that continued to serve air forces around the world. Today, the Romano R.82 exists primarily in the memories of the few surviving pilots who learned to fly in its cockpits and in the technical records maintained by aviation historians and museums. Unlike many of its contemporaries, no complete examples of the R.82 are known to survive, making it a true ghost of aviation history. The aircraft's brief production run and the chaotic conditions that characterized its service life contributed to this unfortunate situation, leaving aviation enthusiasts with only photographs and documentation to remember this elegant trainer. Perhaps somewhere in a forgotten corner of a French airfield, a dusty hangar still holds the remains of one of these magnificent machines, waiting for discovery and restoration, though such hopes grow dimmer with each passing year.